What is up? It's your boy Johnny SHREVE, aka Mr. Tell Like It Is, and the Form Jedi, or Form Police for Jedi. Form Jedi it is. Form King, Form Jedi, you guys decide. Regardless, guys, today we're reacting to my boy Eric Janicki's video, The Ultimate Guide for Bigger Shoulders. I'm not here to say that what Eric's doing is wrong or right. My goal is to break down some of the terminologies, some of the methods to kind of bridge the gap of understanding so you guys that are watching can understand. And if there's a little slight mistake here and there that's in Eric's content, I might just correct it a bit. Let's get into it.
In a mechanically advantageous position to get really good negatives on all of our movement patterns, whether it be a pressing, where we're getting a really nice stretch, or a lateral raise. Time under tension is going to be key. It's not huge muscle groups. So number 3 is the stretch bias. What I mean by that is we want to put ourselves under load in a stretch position.
I like a lot of Eric's approach. We train very, very similar.
My bottom of my rep, crossover grip, I already have tension in that most stretched position. And so what I wanna do is arch the back, drop the shoulders down, slight elbow bend. We're gonna maintain the elbow bend through the entirety of the movement. So we're not gonna go any straighter or any more bent. We're gonna maintain this, like, essentially if you're thinking as straight as 180 degrees, we're gonna go about 170 degrees. So what we're gonna do is that slight elbow bend, cross the cables over one another, get that maximum stretch, raise to about ear level, head height, slow release. But you see how I don't let my shoulders drive up towards my ears? I don't start to take over with my traps at all.
I like what he's doing here, but I'm gonna show you guys how to actually set this thing up that much better and make a couple adjustments, because a couple things he's doing here that are going to naturally make you use your traps and also pull you out of position. So let's go to the lab. We're doing this exercise because it's gonna give us more stretch at the lengthened part of the contraction. So just being in that position, we're getting tension. But the only problem with that is that we're here and it's just pulling, even though it's pulling us across, right? It's pulling us across and down, right? Number 1. 2, when we're talking about like doing the actual exercise and pulling up, we wanna make sure that we take the traps out of the equation. And if we have our head up like this, you're gonna have nothing, you have no choice but to have your traps activated a little bit. Just holding my neck up, my traps have control over it. So I wanna have my head back so I can keep my chest up, just like if I was pressing. And then from here, when I'm pulling, I don't have my traps engaged by being up like this looking, because that's what happens all the time. Most people are doing this. To make this that much more optimal in terms of making sure that we're getting a better stretch, the cables up are gonna give you more of a stretch, right? Because again, we're talking about like stretching, the lengthened part of a lateral raise is gonna be basically down here, but mostly pulling you across. Now, if I'm too low and the weight's just pulling me this way, really, when I'm sitting in this direction, think about it angle-wise, if the weight's here pulling me down on the cross, it's just pulling me down. It's more so stretching my trap than anything else. I wanna make sure that when it's pulling me across, it's pulling me across higher, right? Because again, that line of force, vector force, line of pull, whatever you wanna call it, I wanna make sure it matches with the cable. Because at this point here, the highest, it's gonna keep tension on me the entire time. And on the way down, me keeping my arm up here a bit is putting more tension on my delts.
And as I was mentioning from the side, see how that rear delt is very, very prominent in any side pose. So if I'm either setting up for a side chest or even hitting a side chest, you see how a lot of what makes up the delt is actually that rear delt. And then even from like rear shots.
Guys, again, he's making the point that you wanna make sure you're well-rounded. Right, when you hear terms like 3D, that's what he's talking about. Making sure that you can see the entire shoulder from all angles. From the side, you see the front, side, and the rear. From the back, you can see the rear and the side. From the front, you can see the front and the side, and a little bit of the rear pop. You could see it all, 3D.
Seated row, you have the bench, and this positioning is really nice. What we're gonna do is use a V grip, which you traditionally use for like a seated row. What we're gonna do is we're actually gonna flip our hands and we're gonna go thumbs down. So we're gonna grab here and here. What this is gonna do is put us immediately in a stretch position for the rear and medial delt. You see, even before I pull off with full, you can see how those muscle groups, see the rear delt and medial delt, are already under tension. And the reason I'm not doing this standing is, first and foremost, It's gonna take the traps out of the equation. It's gonna allow me to focus almost all of the tension in my medial and rear delt. And number two is I don't have to worry about the balance and the fatigue built up from standing and getting pulled forward by, let's say, a barbell. And then is I'm gonna not have my feet on there, because usually if I go too far back, I'll top out the mechanism. But I'm gonna pull the shoulders down and back. I'm gonna a big stretch. I'm gonna drive up. As I drive up, I'm gonna lie all the way back on the bench, squeeze, go right down the body. And you see how by having my pinkies up, it drives the elbows up naturally. And you see how my shoulders are still down.
There's a lot here that's not completely correct, but I'm gonna tell like it is. All right, so I used to do this exercise back in the day a lot. I thought that by putting my hand in like this, while I was doing a face pull, would give me more emphasis on my rear delts. Eric's targeting primarily lateral head and his rear head of his delt. And that's where he kind of goes, makes a little bit of mistake. Your rear delt does horizontal shoulder adduction. That basically means it pulls it back like this, right? It does also shoulder extension, which means it pulls it back like this. It also does external rotation. It does this, right? It takes the shoulder and does this. So when you're doing like face pulls, that's why it hits the rear delts more. When you do face pulls and you pull up like this, doesn't matter whether you're like this or like this, having the arm do this at the top, that external rotation is putting more emphasis on the rear delt. When you internally rotate, internal rotation isn't a rear delt action whatsoever. So you might be putting yourself in a position to feel the rear delt because the rear delt's being stretched. When it comes to actually like moving the rear delt, it's mainly by the direction of where it's going. The only problem when it comes to this exercise, if we're trying to put a lot of emphasis on our rear delts and our lateral head of our delts, the closer we go in, the easier it's going to be to actually lift weight. We want to, if anything, extend this angle to here. So when you're pulling, you're getting more rear delt and lateral head delt. But the only problem is that this exercise starts off with, okay, here we got this nice stretch, but then we finish down like this, and we're no longer working the rear delts. We are now working the lateral head of the delt and the traps. So by the time we get to here, the weight's already still pulling. Most of our traps are doing most of that work to stabilize and keep us here. The delts, if you think about the angle of where the weight's pulling, the weight is pulling me here in the middle more than anything else. I want weight more so pulling me from here. Even though you're pulling with your elbows going up, your traps are gonna have a lot to do with this, even though they're staying down. This is rear delt. So this is rear delt. This is not rear delt. No more rear delt, no more rear delt. And we have lateral delts. But at this point here, my shoulders, and I have very mobile, very good shoulders right now, don't feel comfortable in this angle. I feel more so of like a pinching coming in, more so than I do the ability to have my actual shoulders, a lateral head of shoulders actually working. The only stretch that's happening with my rear delt is gonna be from here to here. And by the time I slowly rock myself all the way back, basically from here, it's laterals, no more rear delt. If we want the rear delt to work, if you think about it, the angle we have here, I'm not able to really get as much activation. I will be just because I'm really congested like this, but I want this thing to really start pulling out. I wanna have my hands in a position that when I start, they can already adduct, horizontally abduct. So I'm doing this, right? And still working traps. And my lateral head is still gonna work as well too, but I'm gonna get a lot more from the exercise with making that angle of the weight being distributed outside here than it will in like this. So I hope that gives you some more clarity when it comes to that exercise.
We are going to finally go into, you guys have all been waiting to do, some presses. I'm not saying you can't do pressing, but it's within the confines of those principles we talked about, time under tension, range of motion. So I'm gonna unlock a little hack for you guys. Don't use the seated military. It's too upright. What this allows you to do is get more scapular retraction. So put the incline on a bench.
When I first started in the gym, there was that scap retraction, right? It was this. It was like, we want this to happen, right? And it's very misunderstood. And I hope Eric can correct this. When we're pressing, when it comes to stabilization, or we're just trying to create leverage, that's all we're doing. We want to be behind the weight, under the weight when we're pressing. We want to be fully, completely engaged. The scapular retraction when you're pressing is not what we want.
That allows me to get in here is so comfortable, and it allows me to see how much depth I can get without even having any shoulder discomfort. So what I want to start with is here. Elbows are slightly in front of my body. We're not going 45. We're slightly in front. We're not all the way back here. We're right about there. Nice, comfortable positioning. And what I want you to start feeling getting comfortable with is getting comfortable at basically touching the front of your delt to almost your bicep before pressing out. And we're gonna press consciously through the shoulder cap, slow eccentric load, arch back, chest nice and open, reaching down, pausing in the stretch, and then conscious drive.
I got shoulder issues galore from football, from training. I've been in physiotherapy for the last 20 daggone years. So like my knowledge when it comes to like shoulders is like ridiculous just because of how much work I gotta get done on it because of overstretching, you know, lack of mobility, hypermobility, and just overall, you know, getting hit or banged up injured. So let's go back to the lab and I'll show you what I mean. When we have people kick up and I have someone like Eric who's crazy mobile, this is what's necessary is making sure we can stack the joints. So being here, right, from floor to core, feet on the ground, front and the back of the bench, head back, chest up, is a very necessary angle. Anything more than this is not necessary. This is fine. But to expect people to do this, right, to put the weight on your shoulder and do this, and then press, and I get what he's trying to do. He's trying to get you guys to really feel the delts and pushing in and feeling. Now you will, but it also doesn't feel as comfortable or natural when I have to actually take the angle away from when I call it stacking the joints. And the reason why I say stuff like stack the joints is because you're allowing your fist, wrist, and elbow to stay above the line of force when you're pulling, when you're pushing. So if I'm sitting like this, gravity isn't right, there's gravity. If I drop this weight, it's gonna go right down. I wanna make sure that my fist, wrist, and elbows are underneath the weight the entire time. If I do this, I've just added stress. Even though I'm stretching, there's one thing about stretching under load, just for actually stretching, and then trying to do that while you're actually training. Leave the stretching for stretching, and leave the tension being under a load for having tension under a load in this stretch. There's a difference between stretching here, being engaged, and then using weight to stretch you. So work on just naturally, normally doing a press, and make sure you can control the weight all the way up and control all the way down. If you can touch your delts with the dumbbell, that's far enough. Hope that clears things up when it comes to pressing. Everyone's gonna have different ranges of mobility, different athletic ability, different overall body structures. So what's important is that you get into a position that is comfortable for you, where you can get the most amount of range of motion that you can provide. And then eventually when you're actually working on mobility off of training, then you can increase mobility and get better and deeper. But when it comes down to it, guys, we don't have to overstretch anything.
Last exercise, but definitely not least, we are going to use cuffs, which wasn't one of my favorite things, not in the bedroom, but in the gym 100%, because we're actually going to take this and we're gonna clip it in behind us. So the reason we go behind is because you see in front, it's gonna be more of a Y-raise variant, so you're gonna get a little rear delt involvement. But if we push the weight behind us, it enables us to essentially keep all of that tension in the rear delt. So I've got this set up behind me. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab here on the cable mechanism and lean out and push the hips forward so my big ass can get out of the way. And you can see here, I already have tension in that stretch position.
You guys check it out, guys. Get my training app. It's not just a training app where you're just getting your plans sent to you and that's it. It is my coaching platform where I control everything in that platform in terms of making you a customized training plan, customized nutrition. You can contact me as much as you need. You can track your meals, calories, everything. We do our check-ins all on this platform. It's absolutely amazing. JONNISHREVEFitness.com. Take your training to the next level. Get the knowledge you need to be able to make your fitness sustainable right now. Hit the link in the description below. Do not miss it. So I used to do this exercise and I thought it was really good because again, yes, it does. It does have a stretch. So going behind here and then leaning. All the points he's telling you to do are great. All the points. Like what he's saying to do, if you're gonna copy this side, do it. 100%. Here's what I figured out and what I realized. This exercise is going to end up being a front delt exercise and more of a lateral head exercise, totally and complete. This is gonna be more lateral head dominant than it is gonna be anterior. Reason why I'm saying it's a little bit of an anterior is because my arm is behind me. And when I end up pulling this thing out, this is going to work. You see my front delt? My front delt's still working. So when I was thinking about that, I'm like, wait a second here. This is supposed to be lateral head, some anterior head. Holding this thing here and then leaning for more tension. But then I was like, wait a minute. Damn, I get a better stretch. What do you think gets more of a stretch on my lateral head of my delt? Even if I get my butt out of the way, if I'm just standing straight up, what gets in the way? My body structure gets in the way. I'm just gonna go like this. Watch what happens, because the front of my body's out of the way. I'm gonna let my arm go. What about the lean? Okay, cool. Look at, I get more of a lean. And guess what else I can do? I can lean this way and I can turn my body a little bit like this and get even more by just doing this. Anyway guys, that is it for today's video. I hope you guys took some of those tips and cues and can apply them to yourself, and maybe you can add it to this really good workout your boy Eric Janicki made for you guys. Either way guys, until next time, you know how it is. Iron sharpens iron, progressive overload your life. In the meantime, keep dream chasing. Peace.